NL
Hoping
City,
you like it.
1934. It's the North End.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Did you make him, Spencer?
Yeah, I think.
Hey, I was hoping I got to keep him myself.
You
Those
can
are
if you
for
want.
you.
I'm clear down here, everybody else is over there.
Come
I
on
thought
over.
you smelled it.
Is Jeff coming tonight?
I don't have a room under the smell.
I know.
It's like hot oil and cookies.
Thank you.
You look really good.
You still look good. Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
of course.
We still feel bad that you're leaving though.
Yes, we
Oh,
do.
I mean, they didn't do their job, so I guess I have to come back.
Uh, So Heather, is your son gone?
He's in his second week at the MTC, so he's about 4.5 weeks of home, because he's 2.5 at home. One of his weeks ahead, and then so I'm expecting a call tomorrow, I hope. So maybe he's been, 4.5 weeks. So he still, I think, has 2 more weeks. He'll leave August, whatever that August 3rd, maybe, whatever the Wednesday is. Just somewhere back. I don't know if it's-
Already passed me.
I mean, September.
September.
We haven't lost my mind. But he might, I had to go stateside because his visa stuff. But some of them are arriving like a day before they come out. So I don't think we'll know until.
Where's he-
they shipped up wherever.
Where's he called to?
He's supposed to be.
We sent, like in July, we sent a grandson to, we have a grandson in Chile. We sent one to the MTC in the Manila, Philippines. And then we send one on the 5th of September to Washington DC. So, and he does home
I
MTC.
have a friend who just-
Marie, are you ready?
His
Really
son's there. Yeah, he just got
awesome.
there.
Well,
So I
Okay.
wonder if they'll, or Mel going to DC.
We're ready to go when you
Washington
are.
DC.
Washington DC south. So
I
DC
used to
isn't
live in
even
that.
his mission.
Yeah, right. It's
Yeah.
in Northern
It's just-
Virginia.
Yeah, it's
Everything
the
way
river
up,
is the
so
mountain,
it's
so-
Yeah,
visible,
I used to live there.
Where
Yeah.
did, did you really? We lived there. My husband went to
people do,
medical
but
school
they
back there.
Oh, yeah.
are close enough.
We loved it.
I did. I
They
loved
can
it too.
take
It was awesome.
So
Yeah. Where in Virginia did you live?
Alexandria.
We lived there for the first year. and then
And we
went
got
to
this.
Burke.
I don't know if you were
Mhm.
around, it's
Yeah,
close.
we would always take our kids over to Burke Park
Council,
Yeah.
to play there.
But
Yeah, that's
we
good.
got
We
it up
said
on
it,
YouTube as well.
Virginia
for
was
the
where Colorado
season
was.
meeting. This
Stayed
basically
there
just
forever.
I didn't let anybody interact.
Are we ready to start?
We're ready now. We just
Oh,
barely are.
okay, we were just chatting and I
No,
thought maybe we're. ignoring
perfect.
you
We were
guys.
getting ready, so it's great.
Okay, we'll start. 'Cause we have a really long agenda tonight.
Super long.
Yeah.
We don't have one, so I'm gonna be really fast.
Welcome, everyone, to. What? Oh. There, yeah, I'm gonna let him have a cookie.
They're waiting for you.
We'll give you a cookie, Jeff.
It starts when Jeff arrives.
Yeah. Welcome, Jeff. We're glad you came. You can have a cookie, even though you're late. Spencer made them.
So they get the whole plate.
Yeah. Welcome to Planning and Zoning. We will have our prayer by Kenny and our pledge by Heather. So I don't ever know what we do first. Does it
Pledge
matter?
first.
Pledge first, then the prayer.
Please repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we ask you to please guide us as we meet here together as a planning commission this evening. And please help us to consider the needs of our citizens and to be able to make wise decisions that will benefit our community and that help us meet those needs and to help our community members feel welcomed and loved. And we ask you to please bless that we'll be able to do so efficiently and that we can travel home in safety this evening. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Now we need to approve the agenda. Have you guys seen the agenda? It's up here.
Yep.
So I need a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
And a
Second that.
second.
I second that.
Okay, Kenny moved and Heather second to approve the agenda for August 18th, 2022. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. I didn't see any minutes, Marie. Okay, no minutes. So we need to follow up on issues from the previous meeting. I don't even know what the previous meeting was,
Yeah.
Spencer.
It was last year.
Been a long
We missed the
time.
last one. So, yeah, there's one thing Ellen may need to fill in the gaps. First off, I am coming back. I wasn't at the office last week, coming back for this one to overlap with Scott. Scott Perks, I just wanted to introduce him first as the new city planner. So I'll let him take a second.
Hello, Scott Perks. Just a little bit of background about me, just so you know. I grew up in North Logan by North Park Elementary. That was kind of my stomping grounds through middle school and high school. Went to Utah State, did a little bit of flight school, met my wife. She's also from North Logan as well, Heidi Lehman, over by Greenville, the Lehman family. Went on a mission, went to Guatemala, came back, went to more school. So I have a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from Utah State and then a master's degree in city planning from Texas A&M. So after school, spent some time in Park City doing some resort planning and some, residential, commercial resort style planning. And then went into the private sector for a year down in Arizona, working with aviation and long-term, like long-range planning type of stuff. And then came back and was a planner with Weber County for several years, and now I'm here. So my wife and I had always wondered when we could make our way back to the Valley, and finally found the opportunity. So we're super excited to be back. So it's a good feeling to be back in the hometown. So that's me. Feel free to
Great.
reach out, email me, call me. Happy to chat and go through anything you guys like.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yep,
We're
yep.
glad.
So he just got started last week, and he'll be taking over. I forgot to mention getting everything from the boxes and the folder and sending it out for you. So if you don't see an agenda, it's all right. There's only one agenda item. So hopefully you're not.
You can
missing
always
too
run
bad.
it off, you guys, Yeah.
And there are some on the desk, but yeah, there's just one item tonight. So I'll let him know about that old tattered falling apart folder
All of our,
to
la-
get the stuff
our
in the
lazy
box.
people.
To be
Probably
fair,
stuck
I
in there
knew
from
about
years
it. I forgot.
Yeah, as far as other issues from previous meetings, the Clarkson subdivision, I don't know if that was on city council last night. I wasn't around. The Clarkson place, it was Green, I think it was Green Canyon View, I think.
On Fourth East.
Yep,
Is this the one on
fourth.
Fourth East?
Across from Meadowview, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ish.
Yep.
Kinda
So
like a
still waiting on that
flag
one. I wasn't sure if it was on the agenda or
Mhm.
not. So that, other than that, that's it as far as follow-up.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Spencer. I'm chewing. All right,
You're trying to drag this meeting out all night?
that's right. Let's go on to agenda number 1.
Gotta earn my $50.
We're going to discuss the draft updates to the North Logan City Moderate Income Housing Plan. Spencer, tell us
Yep.
about it.
So we've talked about this at length. I know we've had a lot of discussion about it. It's a big thing with the state. This update, the reason it's back on an agenda, and we did have another development that unfortunately didn't quite make the agenda that I was hoping to be on here as well to kind of have this overlap. But this item in particular is going to be something Scott has to get wrapped up by October. And I wanted to make sure there was a handoff with both of us here to express kind of our viewpoint on it to this point from our city council workshop and planning commission. Also, Scott just got finished helping Weber County work on their amendment. So he also potentially has some good insight to get in at this phase, presumably right before we schedule the public hearing. Just wanted to make sure to circle back on this and make sure all these thoughts are clearly expressed. This is one of the biggest issues, problems, opportunities, whatever you want to call it, for North Logan City and everywhere in the valley right now. So that's kind of a quick update. I'm just going to go through really quick, super fast on what we have so far. I'll let the Planning Commission express kind of thoughts about it and where you're coming from. And we'll let Scott kind of chime in with any of his expertise and go back and forth from there if that works. So essentially the basics, what we decided was to keep the strategies we had, rezone for densities necessary to facilitate moderate income housing, mixed use, and reduce requirements for accessory dwelling units, with the idea of doing things in smaller incremental changes, looking forward to this being a requirement yearly, or it may change. We don't really know. So we don't want to do everything at once. Our plan was to come back in February, January, after that well has been drilled and we can see the volume and flow that's coming out of that well, because our primary concern and limitation on development right now is water, North Logan City's water system in particular, that we're working towards, have a bond for, but we need to make sure that it's going to come through. We don't want to plan things too much. So our first strategy is considering that as far as timeline, early 2023, after we hear results from that well, and then consider a rezone on an agenda by the end of the calendar year, putting that timeline. That was one of the requirements from the state, is to add a timeline to it. The mixed use, we did talk at length at mixed use in our workshop, and the different densities, what that would do as far as water consumption, as far as traffic. We looked at a lot of different different scenarios. And I think the final kind of determination on that was, again, this has to be tied to water. We don't want to outgrow our infrastructure. So early 2023, when that will's had a chance to get in, we know what flows are, to review those numbers, and specifically looking at our existing mixed use zones in our city center, and potentially bumping those up slightly at that time. Again, looking at an incremental approach rather than bumping it way up at once, taking a little bit at a time. Leaving ourselves a little bit of room to continue to change if this is a continued requirement. Then accessory dwelling units. The idea was to look at that again in 2023, and potentially the main one to change for this process for detached accessory dwelling units. Internal, we meet state code, they're permitted. We can't do really much with that. We changed that with the new state ordinance. External, maybe look at making the size requirements a little less restrictive, making the square footage possibilities maybe a little bit bigger, or setbacks, things like that. Again, coming back to that incremental changes. So that's a basic overview of our goals and strategies for ADUs. I don't know if anybody from Planning Commission wants to chip in with any thoughts from workshops, past meetings, kind of personal feelings, things like that.
We've talked about this quite a bit. Anybody have any further ideas, suggestions, thoughts?
So what's the next step from here? Do we need to add details on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so this is the goals and strategies section. This is kind of the section that was required to be updated. There are numbers that need to be pulled from the, I think it's Division of Workforce Services now that runs it. And Scott will have to kind of put that all together and get a public hearing.
Yeah, so the steps here, once we have an idea as to what strategies we want to move forward with, we do have to amend the general plan to add these strategies into the plan. And a general plan amendment is a legislative item, so we have to take it through a public hearing, take public comment, make any adjustments we feel like is needed based on public feedback, and then we need to take it to city council for their potential adoption. The way that the state code reads is everything has to be wrapped up, adopted, and in code by October 1st. So we have not a lot of time to do this. The state also advanced our timeline from December to October with our reporting. So that gives us fewer amount of months to put together reporting for the state. The reporting is a little bit tricky because we have to do what's called a gap analysis. And a gap analysis is where we have to look at what is our supply of housing for moderately or moderate income households, and what is our demand? How many households do we have at that income level? And what's our gap? How many units are we short? We have to know that, and that's kind of like where we start making goals. How do we chip away at that deficit if we have a deficit, which I would assume we do. Most people, most communities have a deficit in housing for especially that income level. A couple of things I wanted to bring up before we move too far. Right now, we're meeting the minimum. So the state code says you have to have 3 strategies, right? They gave us a menu of 23 items. 23 potential strategies, suggestions from the state. They're not mandates. They don't say you have to do this, this, and this. They just say you have to pick 3. And the way the language has been is it's been very open-ended, aspirational. Is the way that they say is like explore these ideas, or look into rezoning property, or maybe look at implementing an ADU ordinance to allow for these accessory units in basements or backyards. But they fall short of a mandate, and the language has not been very pointed. This year, the language got a little bit more pointed, where instead of saying look into these types of things, it's saying implement, an ADU ordinance, or reduce requirements for an ADU so it's easier for people to come through the door and actually build one. But it still falls short of a mandate. So the state isn't saying you have to do these things yet. But if we look at that trajectory, we think that that's probably where it's going to be going over the next couple of years, where they're going to start chipping away to say, okay, if you don't have this in place, then you no longer qualify for transportation funding. That's always been the carrot or the stick, so to speak, is if you don't do this, you don't qualify. Also for this year, what they're also doing is they're saying you can meet the minimum, and that's fine if you want to qualify at all for transportation funding. However, communities that go a little bit further and select 5 strategies will have priority status with funding through the state. So we can do the minimum, be on the list, qualify for funding, but we won't be as competitive for funds when and if we have to compete against other municipalities or communities. So one thing I might want to do in the next meeting is bring back maybe 2 more low-hanging fruit strategies that I think are easily attainable without overextending ourselves, where we think there may be more requirements down the road, just so we can hit that next year. That's something we can look into if you guys are interested. Or we can leave it as what we've got here. That's up to you guys. But at any rate, we have to have these strategies selected. We have to have a public hearing, and we have to amend the general plan by October 1st. You guys have any questions on that?
Yeah, so you mentioned specifically about moderate income housing. How is that defined?
So it is defined as a household that is earning 80% of the area median income. So if you look at the area, we've got, an income delta.
Right, so
low
is
and high.
that this community? Is that the county? Is that the region?
Yeah, I'd have to look at it for a city. Over at Weber County, it was countywide is the demographics. So that boundary is what we would measure from. So that included Ogden City, which kind of brought down those income levels of the other,
Right.
more affluent areas. But there's a geography. We'll have to look and see what that is for a city of the 3rd class, which is North Logan City. But whatever that median income is, it's 80% of that amount. So if the median is $100,000 a year, then we'd be looking at trying to find housing that's affordable for a family making $80,000 a year. It gets a little bit more complicated because it's also then stratified on the number of individuals in the household. So a household with more individuals, their income level is measured differently than a smaller household. So that's in a nutshell.
Is the strategy for this housing development, is it to be a single unit of houses like that? Or is it looking towards putting a requirement that every subdivision now of a certain size has to have some of these housing units within it?
That's not what it says now. That might be where they're going, where they say you have to implement 10%. So out of every 10 homes approved, you have to set one aside for that moderate income affordability. That's not where we're at yet, but it may be there. One of the strategies that they're suggesting in the menu items is that you do that you implement a 10% mandate, basically, or we call it inclusionary zoning, where if you approve a project with, let's just use even numbers, 10 homes, you have to deed restrict one of them or have one put into the housing authority's portfolio to hold on to for moderate affordability long term. We may have to get to that point if the state forces us to, but we'll see.
And I don't disagree with that strategy because I'd like to see those people spread throughout the community so you get more community help rather
Absolutely.
than pack them into one spot and they don't get any.
That's best practice.
services.
Everything that I've ever studied or read says, let's space them all out. Let's not congregate them in one location. Let's
Okay.
find a place throughout the community for them.
So what's your experience? You've obviously been around this. I mean, cities don't build subdivisions, developers do.
Developers do, yeah.
Right. So how have you combated with that? I mean, we're limited, right?
Mhm.
We can loosen up zoning, which opens up a whole nother slew of challenges and issues. But that's we don't have a lot of levers at the commission level or council level. So what are other communities doing? Because the private sector puts
Yeah.
in subdivisions and builds apartments and does housing.
I'll tell you, every single community is struggling with this. When we
Yeah.
go to conferences, when we listen to the League of City of Towns, we go to the APA conferences, everybody's kind of staring at each other like, what is government's role in all of this? Because we're there for the health, safety, and welfare, and maybe we can compartmentalize this in the welfare, responsibility. We're looking after the welfare of individuals who need housing at this income level. But developers are the ones who are building these units, and how do we make it so that they're affordable? I see this as a dog chasing its tail somewhat,
Yeah.
because if we increase density, for example, you might be able to achieve affordability through smaller lots. You're not buying as much dirt per housing unit, but we're talking at income levels that even if the dirt was free, the 2x4s to build the structure is still going to exceed the affordability limit once all is said and done. And we all know that developers make their money when they buy the property. Everybody who's in real estate says you make your money when you buy the property. So the value is set based on existing requirements. So the developer knows they have to meet certain requirements in order to build a financially successful project at the end of the day. And if we change those requirements, then the seller will increase the price of the property, knowing that, they've
Yep.
got to get a little bit more to build this. So it's challenging. Density is one answer. Bonuses are another answer, but at the end of the day, that's not the only answer.
I thought I recalled
think-
from, oh, go ahead, Nan.
Well, I'm just saying we have till October to come up with a plan. It's August, we have September. I would hate to throw in two more ideas that we have to come up with since it took us so long to come up with these three.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
I
I,
would-
in my personal opinion, I think it would be a good idea to flesh these out, write down our, how we're gonna do this
Mhm.
and send it in.
Okay.
That's my thought.
An
I
option.
was just going to ask a question that will help inform that decision. I think my recollection from the workshop we did with the city council was that the transportation funding that the city is using, as we'll call it a carrot, even though it's a little bit of a stick to,
Mhm.
for the municipalities, has not historically been very accessible anyway, or relied upon here in North Logan. Is that right, Alan? I think you mentioned that.
It's TIF funding, TIF and TTIP.
Yeah.
They talk about two different options. TIF funding is grant application. Class C road funds is something that's come up on the docket several times. They've never actually called for the Class C road funds are the funds we get that actually, they go right to our general fund. We like, heavily on the plus there's the state.
But that's not the road.
That's not
That's not the
this-
funding we're talking about here. Okay.
Currently, but it has been proposed several times at the state.
Oh, okay.
So that is a huge area into that one. So, yeah.
But for this year,
It's not.
Which we
haven't historically used. We could potentially use, so T-tip is more active transportation, but we haven't and don't have any plans for a project right now that we use it necessarily.
Yeah, and TTIF is also transit oriented funding. So, we don't have Trax line, we don't have the front runner that we're trying to vie for those types of funds for. So it is a good question. How much do we rely on this funding, and are we concerned about potentially not receiving it? That's a valid concern. One thing that we could look at, and I know that we think, maybe it's best to just let this be for this year and see what happens at the state and the legislature next year or the following year. This last goal where we say create or allow for or reduce regulations related to internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones. That is one of the options. Another one of the options is to reduce or eliminate impact fees for ADUs. The way that some of these 23 menu items are written, you could probably hit more than one bird with one stone if you're creative about how you write your goals. And that's, I don't know, if we wanted to, I would say it's low hanging fruit to say our goal is not to charge impact fees to these ADUs because technically the primary residence is already there. They've already connected to the sewer. They've already connected to the water. They've already built the road. And honestly, if somebody wants to build an ADU in their basement, it's difficult to come through and pay several $1,000s in impact fees to have that licensed as an ADU. Whereas if you're looking to put a basement apartment in your home, you're hoping just to hopefully renovate your basement and keep your costs minimal, as opposed to also paying for more impact fees for infrastructure that's already in place. Now, there is more impact, there's more traffic on the roads, there's more effluent in the sewer system, there's more water usage, sure. But our policy currently, from my understanding, is we are not charging for those impact fees on ADUs. So if we were to write that as a goal here, we could say, look, here's our goal. We're going to continue doing that as we've already been doing. We could get to 4. We'd have to find a 5th to make that priority status if that's something you're interested in
Is there
exploring.
something wrong with just like if we did something like that and just went to 4? Does 4 make it better than 5? Or you're saying
No.
it needs to be
It-
either we do
it's 3
minimum
or 5.
3 or
Yeah,
5?
we don't get
I just really
partial
want that
credit.
4.
I think we leave it in our quiver for next year.
Yeah, and I
We
don't-
struggled to come up with a 3.
Well, and that's what I was thinking. I feel like in our previous meeting, we discussed that North Lowens was a little bit more ahead of the game than some of the other cities. I think that it was our goal to be
Yeah.
a little bit better, so it was harder to come
Yeah.
up with these.
It's interesting. A lot of cities are relying on, technical assistance from the council of governments or from other, agencies to help them put together plans and actually free up staff time to do this annual reporting. Because it's a lot of time it takes us every year to pull all this data and to update plans annually. It used to be biannually, now it's annually. I know a lot of communities have struggled just with workload to get this out the door every year, especially in a way where not only are you trying to just put the plan together, but then the actual implementation of the plan, you'd want to work on that and actually gain momentum. A lot of municipalities are just struggling to get it put together. They're not really making any steps and bringing any moderate income housing online based on the work they're doing. So I think you're doing okay if you can get this in writing and get it adopted on time.
So maybe along the lines
I-
that Nan was saying is keep with 3 and.
And what do we have to do from here? If we keep these 3, what do we have to do between now and October 1st to
So we
flesh
know-
this out? Or
We need to
whatever?
schedule a public hearing. We need to notice for a public hearing and hold that. And then take it to the city council for adoption as a general plan amendment. And if passed, then that general plan amendment would now be our general plan, the section in the general plan for moderate income housing going forward. And then on the staff side, we need to put together a report to the state before October 1st, where we have to pull some information and put together a report and get it submitted.
So
So
we
it
better
has
plan
to-
on a public hearing on the next meeting, I would think, if we want to meet that timeline, right?
Pretty quick, yeah.
And then it goes to, then it has to go to the city council. So we really don't have a whole lot of time.
Yeah, I will say October is the deadline. They moved the deadline up because they wanted to give themselves between October and December just to check on communities and see, did they get this done? Is there anything we can do to help them or prod them along? So I'd say it's a deadline, but it's not the end of the world if we go past it.
Well, I think we intentionally came up with these ideas to leave us room to negotiate back and to negotiate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got to tell me what you think. I'm happy to stick with this and try and get it ready for our next public hearing and move on because it's what, August 18th?
So the next meeting is not, so the next Thursday falls on a first. That means the Wednesday would still be in August. So correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, it would be the 8th and 7th, right? So we have 3 weeks.
For the planning commission, but the city council, because it's the first Monday.
Okay,
And I think
so we would
I
meet the
think we
8th.
timed that. So we meet the 8th. So that means Scott he'd get in that notice by next Thursday and get with Scott Bennett, the recorder, to get that posted in the required number of locations around the city and still meet that requirement. So we could still meet that public hearing. If you get a couple new options tagged on there, he could always add them as alternates, kind of like option A, B at the end on the public hearing. And you can adopt it with or without those if you'd like, or you can just stick with 3. But I think it's very doable. You do that public hearing, it goes to city council the next meeting. And if it goes through, then you're done by the second meeting of September and you're within that October. And like Scott said, if it gets pushed one meeting and we're one meeting over, they aren't going to come raid our city offices, I don't think. So
Well, in worst case scenario, if they're not comfortable with this 3 and we don't get
Stranger things
funding
are happening.
next year, we can make changes to do 5. Right? I mean, in 1 year, we have to make changes anyway. right?
Assuming they don't make any changes in this round of legislature.
Yeah, and we don't know.
Would
We
those
don't
be
know what they're gonna do.
retroactive to this plan?
Well, we don't have to vote or anything on this, right?
no, this is
This-
discussion.
This is just our discussion.
Pass it off to Scott.
Okay.
I
So what do you think?
Well, I
everyone?
kind of agree. Jeff hit the nail on the head from my point of view, where he said, keep these arrows in our quiver for later, which is unfortunate that I think the state maybe unintentionally had this unintended consequence that because of the way they've implemented these things, we feel like we have to take a minimum viable product approach to it and just do the minimum that's necessary, because we know that they're going to come back the next year and the next year and the next year and keep
Yeah.
requiring more of us. So I guess that's why we looked at the 3, which it's unfortunate that that's the position that we've been put in.
Should we do the very
Yeah,
least,
yeah.
that we do the very least we possibly can? Okay,
So.
any other,
the
go
only
ahead,
other thing I
Heather.
was gonna say is Spencer, you mentioned that there could be 2 options or something in there added. So there's 3 and then there's 2 if we wanted to look at. Is that something you guys are wanting or just stick with the 3? I'm thinking 3.
We
That was-
struggled to
just-
get the 3.
I
Okay.
think. we
I was
should
like,
still
I
go
just
with
wanted
the
to make
three.
sure
I don't
that
want
every-
another meeting to go through the long lists again, but that's just me.
I think there's not a lot of time to do this well. If we keep adding.
Right.
But whatever the
see the-
majority says, I'll go,
I struggle with the value of it altogether, but that's just
Well,
my
you
personal
know,
Putting
opinion.
our foot down.
You know.
3.
I think what
I always
I'm
kick them to
hearing,
myself too.
okay, shall I hit my little gavel?
Please
I
do.
think what I'm hearing is we want to stick with this and go for it and try to get a public hearing. Is that correct, commissioners? Anybody have a hard idea with that? Okay,
Sounds.
let's do it. Okay,
Thank you.
can I do this?
Do it.
Done.
There you go.
There.
That
I've never
felt-
done
That
that.
felt good.
Sorry, it felt really good. Yep.
Sounded good too.
It sounded good
Need
too.
More of that.
Finale.
Good thing we have other things. on the agenda.
I should, but that wouldn't work at home, you know, nobody listens to me at home, so that's not true.
Okay.
My husband, anyway. Staff business. Spencer, anything else?
All right. Well, the only thing I have is just, obviously, it's my last meeting. It's been great to work with everybody on here. We've had some great meetings. Great to hear everybody's thoughts and opinions. And I think you all are doing an important thing for the city, even though every meeting maybe isn't always the most exciting one. I think there have been some important decisions have been made by the Planning Commission, and I think they're always really well thought out. And I've appreciated working with all of you in that regard. I think I've given each of you my cell phone number at some point when you've come in or whatnot. If you don't have it, come find me. I'll give it to you. If you ever have any questions, Planning Commission, otherwise, if you remember talking about something, can't remember exact and want to touch base, feel free, text me, call me, whatever. I'm still around. So let me know and keep in touch. But again, it's just been great. I know Scott's going to do a fantastic job. He has a lot of knowledge on a lot of this sort of stuff that I think he's going to bring to the table. So
So Scott, we want to, oh, Okay.
Brought some sugar just to make this a little easier.
I have to say, welcome to Scott and Spencer. We just appreciate everything you've done. You've been here with all of us new, and you've done a great job, and we appreciate that and wish you the best. And we'll try not to bug you, but
Feel free. I'm not bothered at all. So give me a call whenever.
thank you. Thanks. We'll miss you. You can just come, come sit down and
I'm sure we'll
enjoy.
have a rezone coming up here shortly.
Sure.
You can come.
Yeah, those are fun.
I'll heckle from the back.
Those are
It'll
fun.
feel great.
Yeah.
You've learned from the best.
Say, what's wrong with that guy?
It'll be on the most like random thing. Changing water meter size at the street has to be done. I'm just, boo, no, 3/4 of an inch.
That's right. Yeah, okay. Well, maybe we don't want you to come back.
That's
I
the
don't
voice of experience right there.
know. That's right. Okay, so our next meeting will be September 8th, Thursday, September 8th, everyone.
Good to know.
And if you can get on your city site, the agenda's always there. So,
I can't get there.
One thing to bring up as well, reminding me about this, that we do not have the first meeting in October. This is probably the cities and towns that.
good. See,
That, keep that in mind.
Okay.
In the past, that's very helpful, so we set up invitations to thank you. Needed the training that week, it's in Salt Lake.
I
Good.
think we have travel and training budget for planning commission members. Usually we can get at least a couple of you if you want to. I mean, I don't think many people have ended up going just because it's one more thing and it's all day and whatnot. But Eric did go to one time, had a good.
didn't Dwight go,
experience.
or
I think Dwight
Dwight,
went last year. Yeah, Dwight went last year. But if anybody would like to go, let Scott know. And they can get a hotel booked if you want one. Some people just drive down and back. And the conference registration as well.
and that's the first week in October.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that first week.
3-day event then?
Yeah, but you can pick and choose all our card.
Nothing else going on that weekend down there.
Wednesday, Thursday.
I could be out of
Mm.
town. Party.
Can't make Thursday, I know that.
I'll plan to be there, and I live in Hiram, so we could meet at the park and ride there at the mouth of the canyon if we want to carpool. I'll be coming back each day. I've got kids that I need to be back. I just don't want to stay down there 3 days in a row.
Great.
That's the
And-
5th, 6th, and 7th.
Fifth,
just for
sixth, and
everybody's
seventh.
dates wise.
Okay.
I know you said this already. I just want to make sure I got it right. So I always thought the planning commission was the first and third Thursday, but it's actually the Thursday after the first and third Wednesday of the month, right?
It's always the first Wednesday, Thursday, if the Wednesday is.
Is it the new month?
Wait.
If
Okay.
there's a,
So September is the anomaly where we're actually on the, what ends up being the second and fourth. Okay.
yeah,
And we had penciled that in at the beginning of the year when we looked at the dates. We planned on doing it the 8th
Yeah.
of September back then. Too.
Okay.
So we usually follow city council.
okay.
And then in October, we'll still do the 20th.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? All right, well then I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make it.
A
I
second?
second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Jeff and seconded by Herond to adjourn our meeting. So we're adjourned. Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Wait, I have a question. Well, you don't have to wait. This is just, I know somebody mentioned this a long time ago and has nothing to do with planning commission. But canal, why,